All right, we're doing it.
So we got to fight, and I threw him out of the house.
He said he shot himself, and I was in complete disbelief.
Find something that'll make you smile and laugh every day.
Seeing the mother and father holding the baby.
Enter as strangers.
All right, welcome to the Enter as Strangers podcast. Today on the podcast, we've got an old friend in, Adam Woods, somebody that we grew up with.
Boom.
Yeah, that's right. How you doing, Adam?
I'm doing good.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah, doing real good. Thanks, Ed.
Good to see you.
Yeah,
Dude,
so
I haven't seen Eric in, dude, I don't even know how long
it's been over 20 years or something, right?
Oh,
It's got at least that, right?
At least, yeah.
No, I remember last time I was visiting one time and you were at Jeremy's
At my house?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you took off. It was like a quick, maybe I was at your parents' house. I don't know. I don't
Yeah, it
know.
might have been at my parents or something like that. Well, we appreciate you coming in today for the podcast.
Sweet. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I think
course.
that kind of your story, as you know from listening to the podcast, we like to kind of dive deeper into people's stories and what they've got going on, things we don't know, just to get to know people a little bit better.
Cool.
So you are, let me give you a little let's be a little professional here. I'll give a little introduction. You are an author.
I am.
And a motivational speaker. A family man.
I am
a musician.
family man. Yeah.
A man of many talents. So we thought it'd be cool to get you in here to talk a little bit about your experience, both kind of putting together a book. It's a children's
Sure.
book,
Uh-huh.
right? Talk about having, what it was like going through that process. Talk a little bit about your motivational speaking and just kind of, tell us, go deeper into that story. So how long has first of all, what's the name of the book?
So I have lots of stuff out.
Right.
Well,
Okay.
I've written tons of stuff. And so the book I wrote is called Conquer Your Dragons. It's a book done in rhyme, so Dr. Seuss style.
Okay.
And lately I've been writing to my kids. So, because I have 4 kids, I got a lot of kids. And so my oldest is 14, she's a freshman, and my youngest is 7.
Wow.
And so I have this range of where I'm writing. And mostly lately it's been, to my kids at their age range. So
Right.
kids and young adult kind of stuff. Currently in the process. So I have a young reader's book coming out pretty soon.
Nice.
A series called Adventures of the Surfing Ninja. It's for my 10-year-old. I wrote it for him. Yeah,
Okay.
It's
Okay.
for young readers. And then our buddy Darren Haggard,
Right.
who does all of my
That dude's
artwork.
amazing, man.
Dude,
He's
so awesome.
amazing. He's talented.
So
Yeah.
Darren's another guy we grew up with,
Yeah.
and an amazing artist, and he's working on some artwork for that right now.
Nice.
And then I actually have a kind of a self-help motivational book coming out for adults called Ordinarily Great. So I'm pretty excited about that. So that'll be coming out in the spring. But Conquer Your Dragons, I had stopped writing for a long time, and then my stepmom asked me, why haven't you been writing? And just life got in the way. It was busy, whatever, kids, work, whatever. And I said, okay, I'm just going to start writing and I'll find time. So what I started doing is just getting up an hour earlier. I mean, my life was so crazy at the time too. And so I was getting up an hour earlier just to write.
Right.
And I call it freestyling. And it's like some authors will just write out an outline and
Right.
do all sorts of stuff. Most of the time I don't write like that. And so I started just freestyling, and I started doing rhyme, and I wrote the first stanza, and I said, okay, we'll see what happens. And I wrote Conquer Your Dragons, and it's a cool fable, right? A rhyming adventure story. It's about a boy who falls asleep one night, and in a dream he encounters a large and scary dragon. It's not the cute, sweet, cuddly guy that we see in stories today, but it was like dude, he was freaked out. Anyways, and the dragon intimidates him and scares him and basically threatens to kill him and that kind of stuff. And he comes to the conclusion that there's only one thing he can do, and that's fight the dragon.
Fight the dragon.
Yeah.
And so he puts on some armor, gets a shield, and he has a battle with the dragon, kills it, and has a good fight scene with it. But anyways, he wakes up from the dream and begins to realize what the dragon's about. And I mean, and the dragon represents a lot in our lives, right?
Right.
I mean, it's a much deeper meaning here.
Of course.
And the trials and the struggles of life, our fears and our doubts and obstacles and challenges, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's a kid's story. This story's meant to be like you read this to your child or for a younger reader to read this. But the message is universal for all of
Absolutely.
us. I mean, we whatever you're going to call them, we're going to fight our demons or we're going to fight our dragons. I just call them dragons. And so anyway, I started I gave this to a friend, and I said, "Hey, will you read this story?" And he's a motivational speaker. He's been doing it for like 10 years, and he's super good at it and very popular amongst the youth. Mm-hmm. And he said, "Dude, I think you should probably speak about this. Just do a keynote, put something together, and start speaking about it." And so I did it. I started speaking about it 2 years before I even published the book.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I don't know why I did that.
What was your first speaking event?
So I did it for a youth group, right? Mm-hmm. And then I started moving into schools. And then I started picking up corporate gigs, like super universal. And I have a sales and marketing background. And so, I've been a general manager, and I've been a, sales manager and a regional manager. Right. And so that I could speak to managerial dragons,
right?
All that really good, and to sales teams. And
right.
so it just started picking up sales gigs, or these speaking gigs. It was crazy.
Is that something you ever anticipated?
No, I didn't. I mean, naturally, I'm a people person, and speaking comes easy for me. Some people they can't do it. They're freaked out. So I mean, it was geared towards that, but I never thought that was something I was going to be able to do.
So in the beginning, were some of these guys seeking you, or are you marketing yourself to them?
So that's the crazy thing, is that I've never really had to market myself too much.
Right.
And it was just like, oh, hey, I saw, I put a video out or something, and people like, hey, I saw what you're doing. Can you come speak to my group? I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem.
Right on.
Nice.
And then, then I'll reach out every once in a while and stuff like that. And I just wanted to see naturally where it's grown. And it's been going really good. And so, I mean, I have a Conquer Your Dragons keynote that I do. Mm-hmm. But then, just so everybody knows too, I'm an author and a speaker, but I'm also an author success coach. I work for a book publisher. Okay. And that's kind of my day job. And
now, is that Publish Drive?
It's Publish Drive.
Okay.
And actually, Publish Drive is a self-publishing platform. So
right.
We're not a traditional book publisher. We're a self-publishing platform. And so I speak a lot.
Right.
And do all sorts of trainings on self-publishing.
You do one-on-one trainings?
One-on-one coaching, do a lot of that. But I hold meetups, and I attend conferences, workshops.
Yeah.
I'm putting together a workshop for youth. Like, I'll probably take it to schools. It's a writing and kind of publishing workshop.
What got you into writing? I mean, were you young when you decided to get into writing?
So I always wanted to be an English major, like always, but I ended up. Yeah.
Okay.
Who wants to be an English major?
I don't know, and you can't make any money at it, and so of course I just went business. But I always wanted to be like, I loved it. Like, I loved literature, and I loved kind of the reading aspect, and I got into that later in life. Mm-hmm. Like, I was already an adult before I actually kind of started reading. It wasn't my thing.
Right.
And I started writing, and it changed because I took a screenwriting class in college, and that forever. I took a screenwriting class, and I said, "Oh my gosh, this is freaking awesome."
Right.
And so then I started taking as many, writing classes, stuff like that, workshops, anything I could pick up. And so the cool thing is that I write across the board too. I've written a bunch of screenplays and stuff, nothing I've ever sold or anything like that, but it's been fun.
Right.
I did a graphic novel with Darren.
Right.
I just picked it up after I moved. I'd found it again. I'm like, dude, we really should finish this. And like, the story's written. I'm like, we should probably finish this and just publish this.
That's awesome.
I noticed on your site you said there's a novel being released soon. Is that the one?
So no, the Ordinarily Great is one that's coming out pretty soon. It's a kind of a collection of real stories. It's a nonfiction book, and I've been meeting some of the coolest people around the world, and I want to tell their story. So think of it as like a chicken soup for the soul type of thing. Mm-hmm. Except I'm interviewing them and writing their story.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that is really
like
cool.
across the board.
I look forward to that one.
Like, business wise, relationships wise, people with disabilities, people with fighting diseases. Dude, it's unbelievable. I met a lady last night. I was at a meetup in Salt Lake City kind of thing, and I met a bunch of other authors and writers and coaches and speakers and stuff, and it was really cool. And this lady was a walking quadriplegic. Wow. I go, what is that? I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
She said, oh, I broke my neck. I was a quadriplegic, and now I can walk. And she has a limp. She can't use one of her arms. Right. And she's like a walking miracle. Wow. And I'm like, hey, can I tell your story?
Right.
She's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. And so I pitched her. Anyways, I got some really cool stuff that's coming out, really cool stories. And so there's a really good one. I was at my daughter's 8th grade at the end of last year. So she's a freshman now, but 8th grade track and field meet. Mm-hmm. And I saw this kid who clearly had some kind of physical disability. Like he's really small and really skinny, and something was wrong with his joints.
Right.
And I watched this kid who could barely, who like limps when he walks, run a mile, and I almost lost it. I go, who the crap is this kid? Anyway, so it's those stories that I've been like people who are just pretty amazing.
Is that the project that you're kind of entrenched in right now?
Yeah, that one, Ninjas, that one for the kids book, because Darren's working on those illustrations.
Nice.
So we'll have that hopefully all done by the end of the year, and then Ordinarily Great is the big one, and then this whole publishing thing. I'm really big in the self-publishing world.
Right.
Like,
So I'm curious to know, like, how'd the transition go from sales and managing to more full-time writing and speaking?
Yeah, it was kind of a natural progression. It was just a step one. Okay, I started writing again. I got up an hour earlier every day just so I could lay out time. I mean, I wrote more than that, but it was just an hour a day. And then I finished Dragons and I go, oh, I have something here. So I had it edited, and after I had it edited, I knew I had something with the story. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go publish it. I'm just going to do it.
Right.
And
you're in sales at this point still?
yeah, I'm sales and marketing. Yeah, I've been running a company for 10 years. And so I said, okay, I'm going to do this. And so I went and did that. And then, I talked to Jake, who's like a big, youth motivational speaker. And he said, dude, you should start speaking about this. I said, okay, I'll go do that. And then I started picking up gigs. I started doing stuff like, and so it was just this natural progression. And then I wanted to, so with the speaking, a lot of it requires a lot of travel. And I don't want to be a road warrior because I got kids at home, right? I don't want to be gone all week. And I still travel a lot, don't get me wrong, but not like that. And so I just picked and choose. And then I found a job when Michelle wanted to move out here. I said, well, I'll get something, and I wanted to be in the publishing world, and I found a job that was written for me, basically.
Wow.
Like they needed a sales and marketing guy, they needed someone who understood the publishing process, self-publishing world, all of that. And I was like, oh yeah, this is me, and I picked it up, and it's been super dope.
Sounds like a perfect fit.
It was a perfect fit.
What's interesting is like the way he talks about writing these books, like
it's
read the
easy.
book.
No, and I understand the writing, how hard the writing process is.
Yeah.
Right? It's very tough. In fact, we're launching something. I'm part of a group on Facebook called I always get it mixed up. It's something to the effect of Speakers, Authors, Coaches Network, or any of those.
One of those combinations. Yeah.
And we're actually going to launch something where it's like, okay, 90 days. Here's your idea of the book, and this is what we're going to do to get your book published within 90 days.
Wow. Right.
And because some people need that kind of that structure just to get it done.
Yeah, because the idea of, I think writing a book is something that a lot of people think about doing in their lives, but actually doing it seems like a real daunting kind of task.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And a lot of it people would call writer's block. I'm not a big believer in writer's block because you can write crap.
Yeah.
Just keep writing.
Yep.
Right.
And it could be terrible, and it doesn't matter as long as you're putting words. Yeah, you're putting words down on the screen or paper. Anyways, but it just takes time. It's a matter of finally just taking the time out to keep writing. It. And because I coach people on this all the time too, and they're like, well, I got a block, and I said, no, you need to block out time and just write. Don't do anything else, and write and be consistent about it. And for me, it was like at 5 a.m. For other people, it's going to be like maybe late at night or whatever. Just whenever you have a consistent amount of time, and then just to start doing it. But then I have another series that I'm going to release next year that I've already written. It's going to take time to get the illustrations done. They're more in detail, and Darren's pretty busy. I keep him busy. And I wrote those like 10 years ago, and I wrote the first one on a BlackBerry. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When I had a minute,
I
would just start writing it, and and I wrote it all on before iPhones were out. I was a big BlackBerry guy.
Yeah.
so sitting here on my phone.
Yeah, that's cool. That's actually pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is.
When you're that story,
the subject matter of your writings, like Conquer Your Dragons, and kind of tell us a little bit about what drives you to write towards obviously you do it for your kids, but and you speak to youth. I know you speak to bigger groups now and people in business, but is that something that's a passion of yours?
Yeah. So what happened is, Well, there was a couple things. I wanted to write to my kids because I wanted to. If I was like, it was like the idea was if I was going to die,
Right.
what was the message I wanted to leave for my kids?
Okay.
Like I could write a journal, and I've never been a good journal writer. Like my stepmom bought me a journal in 1995, and I still haven't filled it up. It was like a regular sized journal.
Yeah.
Like, I've been terrible at it, and years go by. And so but I like writing stories. And so my idea was, well, I want to teach my kids, if there are any life lessons I wanted them to learn, it would be through the story.
Okay.
And I've always, but I mean, when you think about it, I don't know if it's like this for you guys, but some of the most impactful moments of my life and learning experiences was through a story somebody told me.
Right.
And, storytelling is really powerful.
Yeah.
And every culture has done it from the beginning of man, right?
Yep.
And it's because it's powerful. We learn something through the symbolism or the metaphors or whatever it might be. And so that's where that came from. I just wanted to start having more of a purpose. I mean, the stuff I would written when I was a lot younger in my 20s, it was just like funny stuff or whatever that would be entertaining. And of course, I never published any of that.
Yeah.
Because it didn't mean anything to me.
Yeah.
Right.
And so the stuff now had a bigger purpose. Like, okay, this is what would I want my kids to learn through this story. And every story that I write there's going to be a lesson for them to learn,
Right.
according to their age, right? And then I started. I've been working. There's no secret here. You guys talk about it a lot. We grew up LDS, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm still. I mean, I was a very wayward kid, but
Right.
I've kind of. Jimmy's going through his thing, right? And I've been there,
Right.
and I've just found two paths, and I found the one that worked for me, right?
Right.
And so I'm still, pretty faithful now, churchgoer guy. And so I've worked with the youth in our church for a long time.
Right.
And I've been a coach, and I've been like also like a sporting coach.
Right.
And I'm like, I know what these kids are going through because I went through a lot of crap when I was younger. And I want to just, I keep wanting to wring their necks and say, it's going to get better.
Yeah.
Trust me. It's going to be better.
Yeah.
Everything's going to work out. Life after high school is so much better, for a lot of these kids. And so that's where it went through. And then the whole idea of dragons came around. And I was like, dude, this is a symbolism that we can all grasp.
Yeah.
Because all of us are going through something at every point of our life.
Right.
It's never a moment of, is this guy going through something or is this girl going through something? It's just, what are they going through right now?
What are they going through?
And usually it's something small.
I mean,
but sometimes there's some big ones.
Yeah, when you look back, you go, "Oh, I was worried about that." But in the moment, it's always this big dragon. It's
Yeah.
always this thing.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing about what the dragon's going to be different for everyone, and eventually, it's not as bad as we thought it was.
So,
Yeah, right.
How old is your oldest?
So my oldest is 14. She's a freshman.
Okay. So, and you're not quite there yet, and you don't have girls. So,
Yeah, I have 2 boys, 2 girls. So.
yeah. So here's what I want to ask you, right?
Uh-huh.
Like what Eric just said, how young kids will go through stuff, and it's the biggest deal. And as a parent, you can look and go, that that's just one of those things you go through, right? That your perception of what's going on in your life as a teenager is the world,
Right.
But it's not. It's just a fraction of what's really.
I mean, in the
out there.
grand scheme of things, I try to teach this. Even the people I coach, like in the grand scheme of things, like I know it matters to you right now. But
Right.
in the grand scheme of things,
It
like the
doesn't
things that are
matter.
important to you right now at this age will be completely different.
Yeah.
In a few short years.
yeah.
So have you found, what I'm kind of interested in is you found as your daughter is getting older, I'm speaking, firsthand from having daughters, as your daughter's getting older, because it's tough out there for a teenage girl.
Yeah.
And do you find that gives
She's
you
very pretty too.
Yeah,
And so it's-
yeah. Does it give you motivation and inspiration when you see, because I mean, I don't even know your daughter, but I'm sure she's had her struggles with peers and different things, and then you get the influx of social media and how much that can impact, teenage kids, and
Sure.
she's just kind of coming into that age group. But do you draw inspiration from your daughter?
100%.
Or from your kids that way?
Every message that I have, it's going to be towards what's
To
my kid-
address
to address something
right.
that the kids are either currently facing, have faced, or will be.
How do they feel
facing.
about that?
They don't know.
They don't
To them,
realize?
it's just a cool story.
Right.
But to them, it'll eventually, I think, it'll click.
The
Something-
older they
Oh,
get,
yeah,
they'll
they
start
will.
to recognize.
Yeah, it's really cool. I just every time. So when I do a keynote on Conquer Your Dragons, when I do that keynote, I share the story. Right. Mm-hmm. It's a good marketing tool for me because I always sell books every time.
Right.
Lots of books that way. But I tell everybody, if you could share your story, do it.
Right.
When you're doing a keynote. But anyways, so I share the story, and it's a children's story, so it's short. So I could do it, and it's the whole point of the whole message that I'm sharing. So it makes sense that I would share it. And I can't tell you how many people, a lot of youth, adults too, but especially youth, who come up to me and just said, dude, I thank you. You have no idea how much I needed to hear that today. And that is the most rewarding thing
I bet it is.
ever.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so that's where that inspiration comes, because once you help one, then you're like, well, it becomes much bigger than yourself.
Well,
Right?
that was a question
right.
I had for you. What does it do for you? Like when you go speak to kids?
Yeah, it's incredibly rewarding.
Right.
Like it's I can't put words to it. It's very fulfilling, and it's like we evolve constantly as people, right? And like one thing that is our mission in life, it might change later down the road, or it evolves. And this is just this phase that I'm in my life that it's evolved into this, and it's incredibly rewarding. And
I can imagine.
Yeah.
dude, it's
I'm sure.
awesome. And I'm like, why wasn't I? And then you think, well, why wasn't I doing this before?
Right.
Right.
It seems so clear now.
Yeah.
But it's just all part of.
So
the
you feel
process.
like this is, I don't want to get too grandiose, but this is a calling for you?
Yeah, I definitely feel like it's part of the reason I was here.
Right.
Right. That's part of it, right? I
Yeah.
mean, we don't want to be too cheesy about this, but I mean, obviously, like I have a better understanding of kind of my own personal purpose, like, and this is part of it.
Right.
And it's growing and evolving over time, and the message is change. It evolves and changes. But all of us are going through something, and
Right.
so that's the message of the book, of the story.
So, kind of shift gears for a second. Question I have for you is, what's it like to publish a book and then sell that book? What is the feeling like to go, holy crap?
Think of something that you've done that was very hard. Whatever
Right.
it was, physically, in business, whatever.
Right.
Anything that you've done that was hard, and the accomplishment that you feel. Like writing, especially getting your first book done. I mean, that is like the best. It's because it's something that it was the grind, the dirt, the sweat. I mean, it was everything that the heartache, the stumbling blocks, everything that you go through when you do anything difficult. And then at the end, you succeed, right? It's that feeling of a fulfillment, of accomplishment, of you're running on a high, whatever it is in life. And so writing a book is no different, because it can, for some people, it comes very easy, right? I meet with authors who are very successful in this world. And one guy's like, I have these books that take me forever, and then I wrote a book in 9 days. It's a bestseller, and he made $240,000 last month on the book. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's for everyone. It's going to be a different journey, but whatever that journey is, it's going to be tough along the way. You're going to hit hiccups. You're going to face dragons. You're going to all of that stuff that you can imagine.
Right.
But then if you finish it, and the accomplishment is great.
And you're creating something.
And it's the whole creativity, and I love to create, right? And I know you're a software guy. And I've always just naturally gravitated towards that because it was a creation of something, right?
Right.
And so I've never really been a programmer, like for work, but I like to tell people what to program.
Right.
It's interesting to me. I taught myself how to program and stuff like that. And so I've done that a lot because it was just the whole idea of being able to create something. I think it's pretty fulfilling. I'm not a big artist in terms of drawing and painting. That's not my thing. I'm not good at it. But Darren does it, and he makes these awesome creations.
But you're managing the moving parts, which is just is the same as creating.
It's the whole creative process, the whole creative work.
Yeah.
And so, like I've written these really, which I think are pretty funny movies, and they're probably really stupid now, right? And at the time, 15, 20 years ago, they were probably hilarious to me.
Right.
But I'm like, man, that's got to be one of the next projects. And one of my wife's cousins has a production company, and I'm like, we got to take the time to actually do one of these things.
So that's a goal of yours, is to sell a
I don't know.
screenplay?
I don't know. I don't really care about selling, but producing a film I think would be fun.
Yeah.
And I've taken a lot of film classes and stuff before, studied like film genre. My favorite class I ever took in college was we studied comedies. Film genre class.
Yeah.
It was the best.
Yeah.
He had a little lecture and then we
economic
watched a movie.
class.
It was
Yeah,
the
watch a movie.
best class ever.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, what's interesting is like the way life goes and whatnot, I didn't even know that you were, a writer, that you were writing until I saw your stuff for Conquer Your Dragons.
Yeah, and then that's actually when I actually really, I said I'm going to do something with this.
Right.
And so I mean, most people didn't know. I mean, it's not something that I glamorize. I never really wanted to publish anything. I wanted to publish stuff, but I never thought anything was worthy of being published.
Right.
And that's maybe a dragon that I got to get over, right?
Right.
But yeah.
Well, I'm kind of interested in this. So if we talk about the creative process, right? Since you decided, you said one day you finished that book and you said, I'm going to publish this, okay? And then you had a friend read it and he said, I think you should be speaking. You start speaking, which I think is really awesome, actually, to be able to get up in front of people and convey your message and stuff like that. Also I see the business side of it too. It's a great way to sell books, like you're saying.
Oh no, great tool.
Yeah, great tool for doing that. But let me ask you, as you were going through that process, did you find that as you're kind of in that flow, you know what I'm saying? People call it a flow state. We call it the line of focus or whatever, that the right kind of opportunities presented themselves, the right kind of people meeting that just kind of started to come together? Or did you find that it was a real kind of stop and start, a lot of stumbling blocks kind of thing?
No, it's 100% how it is.
Right.
I mean, whoever, I don't know what you want to call it. You're going to call it The Secret, like that book, or you're going to call it what your line of focus, whatever you guys are going to call it. But you move forward in any direction, opportunities open up.
Right.
And so people ask me all the time, should I write a book? I'm like, yes. I'm not a writer. I don't care. Just get a ghostwriter or learn how to write.
Right.
Write a book because it opens up opportunity. Mm-hmm. Like luck doesn't happen. We get lucky, sure, but we're ready for the opportunity when it happens, when it presents itself. And so it's just a natural progression. I mean, you do anything. It doesn't matter what you do. If you're going to focus on anything, other areas will open up as you move forward. In my case, because I'm big in this, big into the industry, publishing industry, right? That it's, people say, should I write a book? Yes, 100%. It's instant credibility, but it's going to open up avenues and doors that you'd never thought possible.
Really?
Yeah. And then to keep writing.
Right.
And then because I don't know if you want to go, like the world of publishing has changed since Amazon.
Oh yeah.
Since Amazon launched Kindle.
Right.
Like it has changed over the last 6 years, unbelievably quick. Like the world of traditional publishing, it's almost ludicrous to think that why we even did that. Because I don't know if you guys know this, but so here's kind of the traditional path if you were going to go through a traditional route. And some people still want to do this. Don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. There's a place for traditional publishers still. But basically, you would write a query letter, like after you have your book. Okay, you write your book. Now you're going to go try to get an agent. You write a query letter to a bunch of agents, and you try to get an agent. Because most publishing houses, big publishing houses, will not take any kind of outside submission without a literary agent. Mm-hmm. It could take you 2 years to get an agent, if you're lucky to get one. After that, it could take up to even 3 more years just to get your book into print. You lose all control, all creative control of the book. They decide what the title is. They're going to decide what the cover's going to look like, how it's going to be formatted, what's going to be removed, you lose all creative control in traditional publishing. And then you get some kind of a royalty, 6%, and if you're lucky, 10%. And it is ridiculous. It is the most draconian, old school way of doing business
I've always
ever.
heard that about the publishing world.
And they own all rights, all publishing rights in English, and usually in the United States. And I mean, if they open it up to, depending on how the contract's written.
Right.
And there's still people who want to do that for a couple of reasons. For one, they're not good at marketing, and they're not sales. They have no sales bone in them at all.
Right.
And so they want, and they want name recognition, especially if you get on with HarperCollins or you're going to get on with a big
publishing
traditional
house.
printing house, right? HarperCollins or Scholastic, if you want to go into school, whatever it's going to be. Some people want it for name recognition. I'm all about the money.
Right.
And so traditional publishing it's kind of stopped now. It used to be like if you're Stephen King or you're Lee Childs, Jack Reacher guy, if you're a big author like James Patterson or J.K. Rowling, like it's still a great system for you because they're going to go market your books for you. They're going to take care of everything, and you're going to just collect a check and you can write
books.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work anymore. Now, even traditional publishers, they want you to go out and market your book, do everything. And so you lose all the rights and you're still doing all the marketing, and there's no guarantee that you're going to make any money. And the average, even traditional published author is going to make $5,000 a year. You know what I mean?
Jeez.
Wow, that's crazy.
That's probably about the same.
That's crazy. So tell us about the process through, an avenue that you...
So self-publishing used to be very uncool, right? Especially it was looked at as unprofessional, that anybody can do it. And there's still people who put a lot of crap out there. Don't get me wrong. It's terrible books that shouldn't be out there. But they have the freedom now to do that, right? But it used to be very almost you would get blackballed if you were
very
wanting
taboo.
to go. It was very kind of a uncool, very taboo kind of a subject.
Probably very similar to trying to go around the record companies.
Exactly the same
Just
way.
like that
It's
with
exactly
music.
the same thing
Yeah.
with music, whatever.
Yeah.
And so, but we were in this. It's so funny that what the internet and what technology has allowed us to do, and now self-publishing is almost it's cool. It's like the way you should be going, right? Or at least the hybrid approach. Well, don't go through these 5 years before your book's even going to go out. Go self-publish it, and then if you want to go with a traditional publisher after you sold a bunch of copies and and it works out for you, you can do that. It's a hybrid approach. A lot of authors do that. 50 Shades of Grey. She's a perfect example. She's a megastar now.
Right.
She wrote that, self-published
Self-published.
sold a lot of books, got a big following, and then of course a publishing house is going to want to kind of jump on that bandwagon. And for her, it worked out, right? But there's authors like a guy named Joe Conrath. He writes about a woman detective named Jack Daniels. Her name's Jacqueline Daniels, but it's Jack Daniels.
Right.
All the books are named after some kind of drink, like Whiskey Sour, Bloody
sweet.
Mary, or something like that.
Yeah.
Very marketable. But he's gone the opposite route. He's like, I call him the Michael Jordan of self-publishing, because he was traditionally published, sued and got all of his rights back, and then started self-publishing and has made 40 times more money. And he was doing it and writing about it and encouraging everyone to do this way before it was cool.
So walk us through, what is self-publishing?
Yeah, so let's say Eric wants to write a book.
Right.
So he writes a book.
Eric does want to write a book.
I know.
Eric is writing a book.
Yeah. Okay. So you finish the book, and then what'll happen is it's a pretty simple process to explain, but to learn this process is incredibly difficult. Because you're doing everything that a traditional publisher would do.
Right.
And learning that there's two main stumbling blocks in self-publishing. The first one is just learning the process.
Right.
Everything that the publisher would do, you have to learn it. And so there's a lot of new learning curves. And so I work with people on this all day long, every day. This is what I teach them. In fact, next week in Brooklyn, if you guys get a chance, we're going to stream it live. I'm holding a meetup in Brooklyn next week. And it's a step-by-step guide on how to self-publish. Okay, step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. Step 3, do this.
Where are you streaming this at?
So it'll be on publishdrive.com on our website. I'm also going to stream it live to this the Speakers Authors Coaches Network on Facebook. So we'll have 2 streams going on.
And that's when? Sorry.
That's next Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern. So September 13th. I'll be in Brooklyn doing that. So that's a good one. If anybody wants to listen.
Yeah, we'll do is I'll get all that information from you at the end, and we'll just, when we post the podcast, we'll post the link and stuff. So
Sweet.
So it'll be cool too, because we have someone that works with us now at Publish Drive who used to work for Macmillan, a really big publishing house.
Oh yeah.
And she was with him for a long time, 16 years or 20 years or something like that. And who now works, it's ironic, she works with a self-publishing platform, and she's gonna give a quick 5-minute kind of discuss 5-10 minutes on just kind of the state of self-publishing, where it's at compared to traditional publishing, because it's a very cool thing now to be self-published. It makes much more sense.
Right.
I mean, it makes way more sense to go this route, unless you're looking for a big name recognition. I mean, really, that's it. But you're going to make way more money doing it yourself. Okay, so basically, if you want to self-publish a book, you're going to need a couple of things. Step 1, you're going to need an edited manuscript. And it's got to be good. And there's lots of ways you can go about getting your manuscript edited. There are websites like Upwork.com and Fiverr.com, which are very popular freelance You can find freelancers there. Anything that can be done on a computer, you can find there.
Right.
And you'll find. I use Fiverr and all sorts of stuff, but Upwork, I found really good editors, and they do it for cheap.
Upwork?
Upwork.com, and they do it really cheap. Now there's also traditionally publishing houses, and if anybody wants recommendations, I have a list of editors that come very highly, but they're usually a little bit more pricier.
Right.
And so I personally don't use them. I will go find somebody on Upwork and read their profile, do my homework on them, look at all their portfolio, and find someone that works for me. Mm-hmm. Like I got my children's book edited for like $40. I mean, it's a short book, but I got it for like $40.
Wow.
Right.
Jake, one of my buddies, got his. He has a book called your number one goal, and I think someone did it for a couple $100. You know what I mean? It's not a couple $1,000.
Well,
anymore.
and let me pause you there. I think this is important because I think a lot of people think if they want to write a book, grammar, sentence structure, and all that stuff, if they don't have a good sense of that, that's how I am, right? When I write stuff, it's all grammatically incorrect. But you don't have to worry about that. Yeah. I would assume you would probably recommend to someone write. Yeah.
So then there's three different types of editing, right?
Okay.
So there's
so take us through that.
So there's developmental editing, or also known as line editing. Mm. And basically that's like where they're going to tear apart the whole story. And they're going to talk about character development. This needs to be here. This needs to be there. And that's the most expensive and most thorough style of editing. Then there's going to be stuff called copy editing and proofreading. Mm-hmm. Like proofreading is just grammatical stuff, all of that. Copy editing is maybe a little bit more detailed, stuff like that. So there's three different types of editing. You can find that anywhere from freelancers. And you can do it for cheap. But the point is here with self-publishing, you can publish a book for almost for free or very low cost. You know what I mean? For really cheap, you can self-publish a book. So that's the great news about it.
Right.
So anyways, so step one, get your manuscript. It has to be edited and it has to be good. You cannot have grammatical errors. If anybody's reading it on a Kindle or they're reading a hard copy of the book or whatever, and there's grammatical errors, you're going to lose a lot of credibility in the story. Mm-hmm. So it has to be edited. And people are like, well, my nephew does this, I'm going to have him do it. And I'm like, dude, just go pay a couple $100 and have a professional editor look at it.
For a couple $100, you'd be silly not to.
Yeah, I mean, and then it can, depending on what's going on, and if it's like a super long, crazy anthology or whatever, I mean, it might cost you a little bit more. But what I'm saying is that those days of paying several $1,000s to have a manuscript edited, editors are having a hard time, and God bless them, because I have a lot of them who are my friends who are struggling finding work because freelancers now are
everywhere.
Mm-hmm. And we have access to it.
Yeah.
So that would be step one, is get your manuscript edited. Next thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to get the manuscript formatted. Okay. And this is stuff that the publisher would handle. Now the self-publisher has to learn it. Okay. It's not hard. It's just overwhelming at first.
Right.
So you have to get it formatted. And so you'd need, for a print or soft cover, for the print side of things, you'll need a print PDF file. Mm-hmm. And it's formatted to the structure of the book. And we're talking page numbers, how it's going to look, if there's pictures, everything's structured. Okay. Mm-hmm. And it has to be sized correctly. Because when it goes to a printer, if your book's going to be a 6x9 or an 8x10 or whatever it's going to be, 8.5 by 8.5 or 5 by 5, whatever it's going to be,
it needs to be there.
It needs to be formatted to that. And there are people who will do it, and they will do it super cheap. And I got a guy who will do it for you for $75.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is you can get it. You can get it done really cheap. And then for an ebook, which I encourage, I know lots of authors who are not millionaires, but who make six figures every year, and they write full time because they love it.
Strictly ebook.
Who do strictly ebooks. Or 90% of their sales are ebooks.
And this is how Amazon changed the game, is the ebook. Removing the physical thing, because that is an expensive part, or at least was.
The printing costs.
Of the printing
have
costs.
no more printing costs.
Yeah.
I mean, it's...
Yeah.
And so Publish Drive is actually an ebook distributor. Okay. We're going to do the print side of things as well, because you have to in this world, because people want print stuff. It's called print on demand.
Right.
But we started out strictly as ebooks, and we're awesome. And we get your book to 400 stores, Amazon, Google Play, Apple Books.
Is Conquer Your Dragons currently just an ebook, or is it in hard copy?
Yeah, so I had to pull the print because I was having problems with a lot of the pictures. They were coming out too dark. So I pulled the print version. So currently only available right now is the ebook.
Okay.
And with kids' books, you don't sell a lot of ebooks.
Right.
I mean, most kids still want, parents want that hard copy.
Of course, yeah.
And that makes sense. But I still do. I still sell ebooks.
Wow.
Right.
You can tell when I do events because my sales of ebooks go up that day.
Right.
I mean, you
Right,
always,
yeah,
you always
yeah.
tell.
Well, they're sitting there as you're talking, doing
Exactly.
it. You know?
It's really cool. And so there's that. So you're going to need the format, and then for an ebook, you're going to need an EPUB file, which is really simple.
Yeah.
If you went Kindle wants a Mobi file, but it's but if you went through an aggregator like us, who gets you into everyone, right, to all stores, including Amazon, then we would only require just an EPUB. It's really simple, super simple to use. But anyways, so you're gonna need that. The next thing you're gonna need is a cover for your book. Get it professionally done.
Yeah.
Unless you're a graphic designer, I know you got that background. You could probably do one awesome. But if you don't have any skills in that, just get it done. There are lots of websites.
Yeah.
So I bought Dragons and I had them tweak it a little bit, and I had Darren do some stuff with it too. Actually, a little later on, but I went to a website and I can't remember what it's called.
Well, I mean,
And
there's a bunch out there like 99 Designs.
So 99 Designs is cool too. I didn't buy mine through 99
Right.
Designs, but I like that because for like a couple $100, I know $200 or $300, you can have people send you designs. Like
Yeah.
you describe what you were looking for,
Right.
and then they'll send you a bunch of designs, like
And then you
45 designs or
You
something.
can actually formulate the direction that you want to go.
Exactly, and it's those websites are especially good if you don't know what the cover should look like.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
If you don't, you can't
Yeah.
envision that. So those are really good. So 99 Designs, and there's a bunch like that.
Yeah.
Or you can get guys to do them for you on Upwork and stuff like that, freelancers, whatever. Next thing you're going to need is an ISBN number. If you're an ebook, doing an ebook, you won't need one. For the most part, you won't need one. I actually, for a couple of reasons, and I won't go into it, I still use them for ebooks. But ISBN numbers can be bought in the United States. You can only buy them one place, and it's called they're called Bowker.com,
Yeah.
Bowker. And you can buy 10 for a couple $100 or something
Yeah.
like that. Or you can buy one for a couple $100.
And it's like a UPC.
Right.
Yeah,
Basically.
it's just a product identifier.
Yeah,
that's
and be
it's used
careful
universally.
because I think the reason you said there's only one place you can buy it from is because you can find other places to buy it from. But they're not.
So you got to be a little careful. Bowker is the official seller in the
Right.
United States. Like they own the rights to that.
Right.
But there's, like Amazon, you can get a free one, or you can buy one through Amazon for like $100.
Mm-hmm.
One an ISBN number. I think that's I can't remember what it is. And that's all they've done is just bought a bunch of them.
Yeah, they're just
in
buying
bulk.
blocks of them.
Exactly.
And resell
And
them.
then Publish Drive's done the same thing, but we're probably just give them out for free. I don't know. We haven't decided yet. But, and so you need an ISBN number. You have to have that product identifier. And everyone's seen them, and there's a little barcode
Yeah.
with a little number on it. I mean, everyone's seen them. It's on every back of the book or front of the book or whatever. And you'll need that. And then you just need to decide how you're going to distribute that book. So there's a couple of options that you have. So CreateSpace is probably the most popular. It's owned by Amazon, and they do the print side of things, print on demand. And for those of you who are listening who don't know what print on demand is, it's basically you do not have to buy your books in bulk. Basically, if someone was going to go on Amazon and order your book, that order would be sent in and then printed, and it can happen very quickly. So you get your book within a couple of days, right? And so it's called print on demand, whereas before you have to go buy 20,000 copies
Right.
of the book, and if you
Store
didn't sell
them,
them,
yeah.
then you have shipping. Well, you have storing costs and stuff like that. It was just a pain in the butt. You don't have to do that anymore.
That's cool.
It's super awesome.
Yeah.
Print on that's once
like a
again
fulfillment
Amazon
center.
changed everything.
Yeah.
And so CreateSpace is the most popular. But as we were filming this, right, or recording this, they are merging with something called KDP Print. So there was a Kindle Direct program that Amazon runs for just Kindle books.
Mm-hmm.
They're also going to do a print side of this, and the writing's been on the wall forever that CreateSpace was going to be gone. And so they're actually just merging the two, and that's happening now. It should be done within a month,
Wow.
or something like that.
Yeah.
And so that's the most popular. You have another option with Ingram Spark. Ingram Spark is the biggest name in books. Everybody distributes through them. Traditional publishing houses, everyone distributes through them. And if you're going to get into traditional bookstores, Ingram Spark is the one you would go through
Okay.
for that. In the beginning, you don't necessarily need to do that unless you're for sure going to be in bookstores. So those two, and I have experience with both. I've used both. So that stuff. And the one thing with Ingram Spark is if you want a physical hardcover, they're the only ones that are going to do it for you. And there's other companies like Lulu.com, a couple other ones that will do printing for you and stuff like that I've never used because I'm not going to speak bad about them. I've never used them.
Right.
I use Ingram Spark because they're the biggest name in it, and their distribution for print copy is awesome.
Right.
But for ebooks and stuff like that, distribution, I use obviously Publish Drive, but
Right.
because I work for them.
Right. Obviously.
What's different about us is that we have a huge distribution network. We'll get your ebook into 400 stores. So Amazon, Google Play, Apple Books, Barnes and Noble, everyone, right?
Right.
Kobo just signed a big deal with Walmart. They're like the preferred e-reader now, for Walmart. So that was a big deal that they signed. And so any book that goes through Publish Drive ends up in Walmart. But we just signed a big deal with Dang Dang, which is like the Chinese Amazon.
Right.
And so, they're like the Amazon for China, and China's a big market that everybody wants to push into.
Right.
And you're going to start, especially within the next 5 years, you'll start to see a big push for English literature, English books in China. And then I think it'll be the norm within 10 years,
You kind of walking through this self-published process is really interesting because, this isn't just indicative of, publishing a book. There's a lot of parallels in what you're saying to just like a product-based business in general.
Absolutely.
It's like it's becoming the way to go direct to consumer. That's essentially going direct to consumer. In a way, speaking,
eliminating the middleman.
The middleman, exactly. Right. Which is, and it's the same thing in business. If you want to get into, whatever it is, a Sam's Club or whatever, it's for the name recognition.
Yeah.
Because it's not you're not going to get rich going through spelling unless you might, but certain products if you're. So it's a lot of the same thing.
You guys know really exactly what that's like with Tripod.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting. So I'm kind of interested, Woody, to talk a little bit about. We were looking at your website and your profile and your bio and everything, and we were talking about it the other day. So it's weird it came up the neighborhood tree, the thing you got on the website. About
you saw that?
I did.
Yeah. So which is kind of interesting because we were talking about it the other day. And this was a tree that sat in our neighborhood because we grew up across the street from each other.
Right.
It's a big, I think it was
like a maple.
I think it was some sort of maple tree. Who knows?
I don't know.
It's just a big tree that just kind of sat over by itself on the end of the street. And it was the neighborhood tree. Yeah. It was the tree everybody climbed, everybody hung out in.
I can't think. We have just the memories of everything that happened in that tree.
Right. Yeah. So,
or around that tree.
Which is a really weird thing because it wasn't like a tree in someone's backyard and it's a family tree.
Right. It was the neighborhood tree.
Exactly. So I'm curious, you put that on your website, just a little blurb up there in the corner. Why?
So in the book, in the story, the tree I put a tree in there and it plays an important role in the story, right? The tree represents in Conquer Your Dragons like the destination, right? It represents the reward, the feeling of accomplishment, the success after beating the dragon, whatever the dragon's going to be. So that's what the tree represents. And in the story, he sees the tree and he goes, "That's where I'm supposed to be," but he's got this dragon that's in the way, and so that's where he comes to understand I have to fight the dragon if I want to get there. And so he doesn't cower. He puts on his armor and grabs a sword and charges the guy head on. And even though he's scared, right? Isn't that how it is in our lives?
Yeah.
The goal is there. We see the tree, but there's all these stumbling blocks that get in the way. And so this story parallels this, right? Parallels what we go through in life. And so when I thought about it, it could have been anything. But the tree was just, I've had all of these fond memories of this tree in Lodi or Woodbridge, California, right next to Lodi, California, in the Central Valley, San Joaquin Valley, and these amazing. We lived in this amazing neighborhood of kids, and like so many life lessons were learned in that neighborhood, and all the trouble that we got into.
Tons of it.
And
the tree was symbolic for you personally, because like you said in the book, it could have been anything.
Right, in the book, it could have been anything. I chose it to be a tree. And then, because tree is paralleled in a lot of things of nature and whatever, but for me, it had a bigger meaning because of what that tree meant to us growing up in that neighborhood. And I wrote it on the website that I was sad a couple of years ago. I was driving by,
Yeah.
And because Jeremy's best friend, my brother Nate, and Jeremy
Yeah.
are best friends, and I was driving by to Nate, who still lives in the neighborhood,
Right.
and the tree was gone. I was so sad.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, they cut down the tree.
Yeah.
What happened?
I know, right?
I mean, nothing lasts forever.
The
but-
angry old farmer, is he still
Hey.
around?
yeah, there's that field right. I
Yeah.
mean, it's kind of an agricultural area, a lot of grapevines and stuff, and so, for us growing up in that neighborhood, it was pretty cool.
It was an awesome place to grow up.
It was. I mean, and the Spencers and the Woods family meshed really well. Nate and Jeremy were about the same age.
Yeah.
And Jimmy,
Yeah.
they had their group. Me and Jason were the same age.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then, it was really cool. It was like that with all the families in there. The Thomases, Rich Thomas, and
Right.
Eric Thomas.
Eric Thomas.
And then there's just all those families that
Everybody.
came through there. And then remember Tyrone Brown. And,
Yeah.
Yep.
and,
Yeah.
and so, I mean, it's
Yeah,
just,
it's
I mean,
funny.
and everybody's smiling
Well,
in here because of all the good
Yeah,
memories
and we
have
talk
about
all the
that.
time about
Yeah.
the times down at McCollum.
Oh,
the
my
subject
gosh.
has come up a
Dude,
ton. You live down
So the
there.
McCollum River, for those of you who don't know, it runs really close through our neighborhood, and it
Right.
runs out into the famous Delta, right,
Yeah.
out into the Bay Area
Yeah.
of Northern California. And we would spend in the
Countless
summer
hours,
times
all day.
just like the river gets really low, and so you can go walk in
Yeah.
it, whatever, fish and find
in
these
it,
fishing
walk
holes.
through it, yeah.
I tell the story all the time. Actually, we were walking one time fishing. Everyone, it was I don't know how many guys were there. 5, 10 of us. I don't know.
Right.
Just a bunch of people going fishing.
Yeah.
We were walking down, and we were in single file line because a lot of times there would be some deep holes or
Right.
something like that. And I joke about this all the time. I tell my kids this story. I was just walking down, and then I don't know if you remember this.
I
was just
remember.
walking this, and all this. Jeremy steps over.
Yeah.
One thing, and then all of a sudden, Woody's gone.
He's gone.
I disappeared. I fell into a hole
Yeah.
that Jeremy had stepped over,
Yeah.
and the only thing that was left out of the water was my fishing pole.
Yeah, it was
I'm like, I
just
can't
his
get the
hands,
fishing
his
pole.
fishing pole. Yeah.
Save the pole.
It was hilarious. We're like, where's Woody? Oh, shoot. Just way down in the hole. Yeah, that was so funny.
It just disappeared.
Yeah.
I'm like, fishing pole
Yeah.
up in the air.
Well, it's cool to because when we saw that on the website, what's cool is that you incorporating that into the book, and of course for us, there's an emotional
Yeah,
tie there and stuff
right.
like that. And I think that for anyone who wants to write, drawing, especially if you're writing things that are in metaphor, and you can always pull from your past. It's a good source to kind of pull from.
Definitely. I
Yeah.
mean, I encourage that because this is what you know best. I
Right.
mean, some of the best stories are just the ones that were from somebody. They're based on something that you've experienced, right?
Right.
And this is real life experience that you can write to. You understand this. You know this.
Yeah.
So that's important in writing.
Yeah. I want to shift gears a little bit because I'm really interested in the motivational speaking that you do to businesses and
Sure.
to for lack of a better word, grown-ups,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I would imagine that you talk a lot of the same things because it's not the Concrete Dragons can apply to anyone from ages 2 to
Sure.
102. So for you, what's that like? Because I think that you kind of hit on it there a little bit with the story of the boy who sees the dragon in front of him, puts your armor on, he's afraid, but he's got to get through it to get to the tree, right? Which is a great metaphor for all kinds of stuff in life.
Right.
And we all know people, ourselves included, who you always hear the saying fear of failure, right? But I think a lot of times people are fearful of the success too,
Oh, definitely. There was something to being like my brother Nate.
right?
We've talked about this a lot. He's like, dude, I think I'm afraid to succeed.
Yeah.
And my brother is probably one of the most talented people I've ever met.
He's got this ability to focus on things and master them.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, this guy taught himself how to ice skate,
Yeah.
like figure skate.
Figure
He's doing
skate.
triple lutzes and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
I'm like, who does
Ballet.
that? He did ballet. So, and it was the funny thing is somebody asked him, one of our buddies said, hey, dude, you want to just kind of be a backup dancer in the Nutcracker? And he's like, dude, I've never done. He's like, you'll be all right. Just follow along. And
Yeah.
it's like, all right.
Yeah.
And then the next year, he got the leading role as the Rat King, and then the Nutcracker the year after that.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just a guy that he could pick up stuff,
Yeah.
and he did it with tennis recently,
yeah.
and now it's golf. The
Yeah.
dude is.
Oh, is he?
And I've been telling Nate for
last-
years. I'm like, dude, you'd be a great golfer. He's like,
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And he called me a couple months ago, and he's like, dude,
Yeah.
I'm a golfer.
Last time he's up here, he made it go to the driving range.
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 He's always wants to go golfing now, and I was
Yeah.
like, that's just his thing right
Yeah.
now. It's so. The point is that he tells me we've had these conversations. He's just like, dude, I think I'm afraid to succeed,
Yeah.
and I'm like, okay, well, let's work through it.
Yeah.
That's his dragon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about when you're working with people in business and stuff like that, because the thing about working with adults is like they're much more guarded, they're much more set in their ways and stuff like that.
Yes.
And you've got to get past the for lack of a better term, you got to sometimes get past the bullshit to
Totally.
be able to really get to the person.
Yeah, and that's the tricky part of being a good speaker, right? Because you got to break through these barriers. Like I walk into these rooms, into board meetings, or to like an assembly hall or whatever,
Right.
and you could see it on their faces.
yeah,
Like,
they don't
here's
wanna
a
be
guy,
there,
I don't want to be
and-
here, blah
yeah.
blah blah blah.
Yeah. What's this young punk kid gonna teach me?
You know what I mean? And the awesome thing is by the end, if they're clapping, if they're laughing, if they're into it, if they're shaking my hand afterward,
Right.
it makes it that much more rewarding. That's the cool part. That's the challenging part about speaking, is captivating the audience.
Right.
But then when you get them,
Yeah.
Right.
it's awesome. But no, it can be very difficult, right? I just recently did one of my buddies has been with PG&E, which is a big, you guys remember this, a big utility company,
California, yeah.
a gas and power company out in California. And I went and spoke to them. One of my buddies is a manager over there. And he said, hey, can you come speak to a group of our managers? So yeah. And I walked in, and there's probably 20 of them, for that branch or whatever, managers sitting in there. And each of them, they have like 20 or 30 people that they manage or whatever, And I thought a lot, well, how is I going to reach these guys? And Tom didn't want me to bring in my guitar. As you bring in a guitar, sing a funny song, or have them sing along.
Right.
That's always a good icebreaker or whatever. And he didn't want me to bring a guitar. And I said, okay. And so I went in there, and I found that humor is always the best. And I said, okay, before I started anything, I said, okay, I'm going to do something. I do this with youth all the time, which I do, but not all the time. And I told this group of managers these are very professional people in a very professional setting. And I said, hey, I want you guys to tell me one thing that you do good. And they're like, this is the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
What is going on? And I said, well, this is what I hear from the kids. And then they tell me this. And I go, and I'll start. And then I go, okay, I'll tell you. I know adults don't want to do this. No one wants to be that guy that says I'm good at something, right?
Right.
And I said, but all of us in here are really good at something. And I said, I'll go first. Hi, my name's Woody. And that's my nickname. My name's Woody, and I'm really good at looking good. Dude, I got that in the butt. I nipped that in the butt. Everybody's like, oh.
Yeah.
And then they kind of break open, and then I always follow up back into that. I tie everything back into what they're good at. But then I start to break it. It opens up conversation with them, especially in smaller rooms. I can do this, right? So, well, tell me something you're good at. And someone will say, I'm pretty good at doing math. I'm like, dude, that's so boring. But awesome. Just kidding. And then everybody starts laughing. And then we open them up. But, laughter is always a good one.
Yeah.
I also like to share videos of like funny shows. Like one of my go-tos is The Office.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
Dwight Schrute's fire drill is the best. But anyways, it can be tough to reach them, but a skilled speaker will get through to the audience.
I'm sure I know the answer to this, but I was kind of curious. What do you find more fulfillment in, speaking to adults and breaking down those walls, or the youth and the kids?
The kids.
Of course.
I figured
Kids. The kids, because I remember what it was like to be them.
Right.
And I know the crap that they're going through. And they think their whole vision of the world to them is so small in comparison to what us as adults have experienced, right?
Right.
They don't know what it's like to be an adult. They can't.
Right.
Right? But we remember what it was like to be where they are.
Right.
And Albus Dumbledore said it best. If we forget what it's like to be a kid, then we failed them.
Right.
And so for me, it's always, the kids have always been like, I love it being with them as much as possible. I try.
What do you find, like, for you, in what you would instill into a kid or even an adult, in someone who's, really struggling with something? Because, your dragon could be anything. It could be, something work-related, a goal you can't reach. It could be addiction. It could be something, relationship in your family.
Yep.
So what do you, I'm kind of interested in your take on what's a process that you found work for getting from A to B on a personal level?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah. So
That's kind of a question. The 4 steps to conquer a dragon. I think I saw that on your page.
Yeah.
What are those
Yeah.
4 steps?
Yeah. So let me share an experience I had with you.
Yeah,
So at a
please.
young age, so I'm 39 now, right? I just had my 39th birthday. And when I was about 35, 4 years ago, I was sitting watching a TV show with my wife. and it was on mental illnesses, and they were talking about one and like the effects and what people are going through, what it feels like for them. And I'm like, holy crap. I'm looking at my wife and I'm looking at the screen. I'm looking at my wife. She's like, dude, what's going on? And I said, I've experienced this. And she's like, what? And I'm a very positive and just naturally outgoing kind of a guy. And I said, that's depression. I've had that. I just didn't know that's what it was.
Yeah.
And so when I was 14, so my parents divorced when I was 8. And when I was 14, my dad remarried. And so there was a lot of stuff going on in my household, and I had to move, and there was a lot of stuff. And when I look back at my life and everything that was going on in that time, I could see why someone might fall into a deep state of depression. Mm-hmm. And it was ugly. But the thing was I didn't know what I was experiencing. I didn't know what it was. Right. I just knew how I was feeling, and it sucked. And I'm like this 14 or 15-year-old kid, freshman year in high school, and I'm feeling miserable. And just absolutely miserable. Like I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to do anything. And anybody who's ever, had to deal with depression knows what I'm talking about.
Right.
And obviously there's different levels of depression. I don't know, on a scale, right? Mm-hmm. Mine was pretty big.
Right.
And
grade suffering, stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, let's see, the grade, I don't remember. I mean, probably. At any rate, I was not in a good state. Mm-hmm. And it was a hard family situation at that time. I mean, blending families is hard anyways, but we were the two most opposite kinds of families to blend.
Right.
Happily, everything worked out, and me and my step-siblings are very happy. We all get along really great.
Right.
But it was a really hard time in my life. Like I never wanted to go home. Anyways, and I was depressed, and I didn't know that's what I was feeling, and I developed OCD really bad. Like really, really bad. And I hear comedians joke about this who've had OCD. And to me, it's hilarious because I'm like, yeah, I couldn't walk down the stairs. I remember what that was like, But at the time, it was driving me nuts. And I didn't know what was going on.
Right.
And very easily, because I didn't know what was going on, I didn't talk to anybody about it. Right. And dudes especially were a little bit more closed up, right? Yeah. Typically, right? Yeah. Most guys are. Yeah. And especially at that age, I was like, it was like a sign of weakness or something, and I was supposed to be this tough football player or whatever. And anyways, I mean, I could have just went down the hallway to my parents and they would have known exactly what was going on and how to help. Parents are pretty good at this stuff. Right. And I didn't do anything. I didn't talk to anybody. And I remember sitting in my room one day, and I don't even know where I got this. It was a cassette tape of Depeche Mode's Speak and Spell, that album.
Right.
And I have no idea how I even got it. And I put that into the tape, and I started playing the stereo. And 2 songs on there. It was after I heard them. It was New Life and then Dreaming of Me, right? Mm-hmm. And anybody who's Depeche Mode fans, and like when you listen to them now, it's definitely alternative 80s. Right. Kind of cheesy, but sorry, Depeche Mode fans. I mean, I love Depeche Mode. I've been to a concert. Anyways, but they sang, I heard those 2 songs and something clicked in my head. And it was just at the right moment, the right time, something I needed to hear. And then I could start, it was like instant relief to the pain and the darkness and that emptiness that you feel when you're depressed. Mm-hmm. And it was like instant. And it didn't go away right away. But it was like a little bit of relief where I could say, oh, I could start fighting this now. Like I could start, like when the OCD was really kicking in, I could say, no, this is not a logical thing. I'm going to be fine. Everything. Because OCD people, they're like, if you walk down the hall or you go down the stairs, something bad's going to happen, right? Yeah. Stuff like that. And so I started to think logically, like, no, this is silly. Everything's going to be fine. And I'm still a little OCD. My wife could attest to that, but not, I mean, I've nothing compared to what it was.
Let me ask you real quick, not to interrupt your story, but I'm just curious because we like to go deep, on the podcast whenever we can. Was your depression to the point that you were maybe having thoughts of hurting yourself or suicidal at all?
So I never got suicidal. I don't think I went suicidal.
Right.
I mean, everybody has those thoughts, right?
Right.
But I mean, it's possible, but it wasn't to a point that it was going to happen.
It wasn't something that was obsessing your
No,
mind.
I was not obsessive about it.
Okay.
Not about that.
Right.
Other stuff, but not about
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was after that I was able to kick it. Like, it took me a long time, and if I would have gotten professional help, it would have been like way better.
Right.
Right. And that's why I tell kids all the time, dude, you're not alone in this. I know if something's going on, go talk to somebody. There's always somebody you could go to. You got parents and teachers and principals. I mean, whatever the dragon is, you're always, lawyers and police officers, whatever it is, whatever the dragon you're facing, there's always someone you can go to. Medical professionals, other health professionals. I mean, there's always, you got friends. And I was like on this on my own. And I said, dude, that was the biggest mistake I ever made.
Right.
Eventually, through that, and there were other things in my life that helped that, right? I didn't stay in bed because I was playing football and I was running track and I was very active and I didn't want to let my team down, so I would show up.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then for like glimpses, I would not feel the pain and stuff, if I was like running or whatever. And so, and that was a big one for me. And so, but really what it came down, it was a big learning experience as a young kid about this whole idea of being able to conquer dragons. And for me, when I teach these kids or whoever, that it comes down to 4 steps. And it's just recognizing what's going on. And most of the time it's really simple. I'm feeling this way, something's going on, whatever, relationship, whatever. It's really simple.
Call it out.
Sometimes it's not as easy, right? To name it, like in my case. But for the most part, just recognize it. And a lot of that goes down then is figuring out, recognize where the source of the problem is, right? For some people, it's that drink. For some people, it's the girl. Some people, it's the guy, whatever,
right.
Whatever the dragon is. And then the next step is to gather the tools that you have available to you, right? For me, one of the biggest tools was music. And it's still, all of us love music. And I play music. And it is such a powerful tool for good and bad. Right. Certainly, there's some bad music that will bring you down, and there's some great music for every occasion to bring you up. And so that's the next step, is just gather your tools. And really, where I get how to do this came from a Bible story. It's David and Goliath. That's where I figured this out. Wow. David and Goliath. I don't know if you guys remember the story, right? Yeah. Everybody, that's like the biggest underdog story. It's dope. Everybody loves that story.
Yeah.
And but basically, like, David, he sees what's going on, like, there's this giant of a man talking smack, major smack. And really how it was going to work between the two armies was that, hey, this guy would come down into the valley, each are on each side of the valley on a mountain. He's going to come down. Everybody's going to, each side's going to send over a champion to fight. And whoever won, well, they won the battle.
Right.
Well, no one wanted to fight Goliath until a little young kid comes down and goes, dude, what is going on? The most amazing part of this is that he ends up in front of Saul, King Saul, David does, and convinces him to go out and let him fight him, which is, I'm like, dude, what happened there? Yeah. It was a pretty convincing argument. But anyways, it's interesting how the story goes is that David gathered, the armors and shields and stuff wasn't going to work for him. Right. But he had a bow staff, some smooth stones, and a sling. Those were his tools. Right. And he went out there, and how the story reads is really interesting, is because when Goliath comes to meet him, David charges him. He doesn't cower. He doesn't tiptoe his way. He goes right to him. And when I've read that story all of these years ago, I'm like, holy crap, that's the blueprint of beating your dragon. Like, his dragon was a 9-foot-tall giant. Right. Right? His tools were a sling and some stones. And we know how the story goes. He uses a sling, hits him in the nose, uses the Goliath's own sword and cuts off his head. It's like crazy. Right. Like, unbelievable story. Yeah. I'm like, is this real? I mean, it's like crazy. It's the cool story. But those are the 4 steps that he took. He recognized the problem wasn't a hard thing for him to do. He gathered the tools that would work for him. Armor and sword, not going to work for him. Right. But in this case, it was what he gathered. Right. And he came up with a plan. His plan was pretty simple, right? I'll talk to Saul. I'll get the stones. I'm going to go charge this guy and use my sling. That's his plan. It doesn't have to be elaborate. Right. My plan as a young kid should have been, when my parents get home from work, I'm going to go walk down the hall and talk to them. Right. Right. That should have been my plan, and it wasn't. Yeah. So they don't have to be super complicated, depending on what the dragon is. And then the last thing is take action. David charged him, and you got to take action.
That's the biggest one.
It's the biggest
in my
one.
opinion.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Is taking the action.
You got this, like, I talk to authors all the time who are like trying to write a book, and they're like, got this dragging in front of them, this writer's block or whatever. I'm like, dude, you just got to take action.
Yep.
You just have to do it.
Momentum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just starts to build.
Yeah.
You got to do it.
Yeah.
Nothing gets done unless you take action.
It's the dark, scary dragons, the secret dragons.
Yeah.
That are the hardest ones to face.
Yeah, and
and
I
take
think
action against.
Yeah, and I think the ones that are self-caused.
Yeah. Of course.
You know, it's different if something just happens to you, like in whatever
Right.
circumstance happens, situation that's out of your control.
Yeah.
The hardest ones, at least for me, a lot of the time, are the ones that
That you
or
created.
that are my created.
Yeah.
That was my fault. Those are hard to swallow. But
Yeah.
you got to face them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So those are the 4 steps: recognition, gathering the tools, making the plan,
Yeah, those are great basic
taking action.
steps.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really good, actually.
Yeah,
It's so simple, and it doesn't need to be. It shouldn't be complicated.
Right.
Life can be complicated, but it's usually a little better than we expect,
Yeah.
and it's a little simpler, the process.
So let
But
me
it
ask,
has to be.
Let me ask you, as an author and a speaker, I was listening to a podcast recently with the author of the guy who wrote Fight Club.
Oh,
right?
sweet, yeah.
And he's a really gritty writer, in a lot of his stuff is. Anyway, one of the things that he spoke to, and I'm wondering if you find this is the case, because I'm sure that you share some personal stories and things like that, depending on who you're talking to and what you're speaking with and
The
stuff.
stories change depending on the audience.
Do you find that when you go do a speaking event and you speak about your book and things like that, that it breaks down walls and opens people up to you, where they come up to you afterwards and they start to share their stories with you?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. 100%. Adults and kids.
Right. Because they see you be vulnerable, or like this
Right.
is how he talked about it. He tells these stories, which aren't always his stories. He's just presenting them as his stories, in the books he writes. But he says that it gives people permission
Exactly.
to approach you.
I mean, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And the whole vulnerability about it.
Yep.
Yeah. It's an important step to it. No, but that definitely happens.
It does.
Absolutely, 100% all
Yeah.
the time.
People come up to you, want to engage with you, talk.
Yeah, and then sometimes they share things that I shouldn't know, right?
Right. Right. Yeah.
But it's good that it gets them talking.
Yeah.
I mean, we just got to talk. I mean, half the problems in this world would be eliminated if we just really talk
People
about it.
don't like to open up and break those
Yeah,
walls down.
it's the vulnerability
It's
issue,
the vulnerability
you know?
issue, for sure.
That's a great point.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a little off topic, but one of the things we like to do on the podcast is get the story within the story.
Sure.
And this is something I'm kind of interested in, and feel free to not answer it if you don't want to. But I think it's real applicable to a lot of people because when your dad remarried, right, and
Yeah.
that it was a pretty big family,
Yeah, so everyone knows. So I was the youngest of 5 kids,
right?
and only 4 of us lived at home. My older brother had moved off and lived
Right.
with my grandma, so it was just 4 of us at home. And then when my dad remarried, he married a younger girl, and so she had 4 kids, and her oldest was the same age as me, the youngest in my
Right.
family.
And
then
when
they had 2 more to
And
go.
when your dad remarried, it was just you that went.
Yeah, so because Nate and I are the closest. Nate and I are like 3.5 years apart,
Right.
but Nate was already 18 when
Right.
my dad remarried, and so he
He
stayed
stayed at home.
And
So-
so the new house was bought, and I went with Dad.
So my question is,
Yeah.
for you is what was that experience like for you?
So it was miserable. It was
Because you were the lone duck from the one side,
right. I was a lone duck, and then I had 3 stepsisters and a stepbrother.
Right.
And at the time, the stepbrother and I didn't really get along. We're the same age. Mike and I are the same age. We're great. We're get along great now.
Right.
And he was a lot more mature. He was one of those kids that were way above their age, in mentality and stuff like that, and personality. And I thought the girls were crazy. It was they had grown up. They had a pretty hard life, and uninvolved dad, and mom had to raise them. It was. Anyways, everything's great now, but it was incredibly difficult. I hated it. I hated being home, right? And we grew up as Mormons, and we're all about family,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And I hated it. And so that led me to do a lot of, I mean, it wasn't the only cause of it, but it was definitely sparked a lot of it.
Was your hatred pretty vocal? Was Dad any word to the wiser? Did you have those conversations with him?
That's not my, so I was, the only vocal conversation that I had where I had to switch high schools, and that's hard for any high schooler to do.
Oh yeah.
And I was pissed. And I did not want to switch high schools, and I begged them, and I argued, and I fought for that, and they said no. It worked out for the best in high school. But I was a pretty quiet. I've always been a very respectful to my parents, kind of a kid, respectful person. I would never talk back. I tried to talk back to my dad one time in the 5th grade, and he punched me in the stomach, and that was it. I'm never doing that again. Right? My dad's pretty old school.
Yeah.
It wasn't hard, but it was enough to wake me up and be like, oh, because I was trying to impress a girl, kind of thing. And anyways, but I've always been real respectful, and my step siblings were not. They were very vocal and yelled and screamed and cussed and chewed out parents. That was just, to me. But I was never like that. So I was always quiet about everything. I was just like, Dad told me to do something, I did it. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, that I hid a lot of things, right? Mm-hmm. The girls, my stepsisters were very vocal about things, and everybody knew their position on stuff, not mine. And so, I mean, it led to a lot of drinking and a lot of partying and a lot of drugs and not hardcore stuff, a lot of weed and stuff like that, But definitely not the path that we were raised to follow, okay? And so that got pretty bad. And I figured out early on in life that I have an addictive personality. Mm-hmm. And so those things can be very bad for someone with a personality like me. Mm-hmm. And one day this is halfway through my senior year, it had escalated pretty good. Like it was pretty good. Mm-hmm. But, and I'm an outgoing guy, life of the party. And then when you get a few drinks in me, dude, it's like 10 times that, and it was a blast. Don't get me wrong. Right. But, I had a really bad night one night. Jose Cuervo and I did not mix very good. And there are some other things I don't, because if my kids hear this, I don't. Right, of course. Sure, I'm not ready to share that portion of it. Absolutely. I have no secrets from my kids, but my wife tells me I have to wait to tell those stories. Right. And there's something else happened that night that wasn't great. And I was praying to the porcelain god all night. Right. And I woke up and looked into the mirror. And I was, super pale, And
you're a senior at this time?
I was a senior in high school. Right. And I was really pale and, just very hungover, not doing great. And I looked in the mirror and I did not like what I saw. It was almost like I was seeing the path that was going to happen to me if I continued at that. And that day I decided to change. And it sucked. It was so hard. And I'm such a social person, and a lot of the drinking and the weed and other stuff was just from the social group. Right. And so it was so hard for me to stop. And I learned really fast that I have an addictive personality. Mm-hmm.
Did you have to change friends? I mean, not change friends, but did you have to kind of...
Yeah, what happened? So I grew up with I've always had a group of religious friends, and, we call them non-members of our church, right? Like in our church growing up, you always have this like really strong group of kids. Right. And you have great friends, great memories, and we were all part of that group. Right. But then I grew up with I have friends all over the place. Mm-hmm. And I had 6 best friends that were not members of our church or whatever. And and we called ourselves the Dookies. There's 7 of us. And we're great friends today. But I had to stop being around him as much. Right. And even today, and this is sad to say, like I kicked it, right? I didn't get bad, but I mean, it was definitely a big dragon I had to kick. Mm-hmm. And the weed was almost harder than the alcohol. I mean, it was tough. But for me personally, like I had been down 2 paths. Like I'd raised a certain path, and then I had gone down a different path that was contrary to what I was raised to be. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was almost a clear difference of where my happiness was going to be. Right. And so for me personally, and everybody who grows up in any kind of a religious family has to make these kinds of decisions for themselves. But for me personally, it was a clear direction. Mm-hmm. And that's so when I look at a lot of my friends who have fallen into drugs and are addicted to a lot of other things, it's really sad to listen to Jason's, the kind of stuff he's been battling right now. You guys had him on the podcast a while back, and and I go, well, what's the difference? And there's a lot of my friends, who are addicted to hardcore drugs and have been in and out of prison, whatever. And I go, what was the difference? And a lot of it was decisions, but for me, it was church and religion. And so for me, it was, each of us has to choose the path, but for me, it was a clear path. And so for me personally, because I think I would have gone down a really, really dark path.
Right. Well, I think you're lucky you hit that for lack of a better term, that aha moment where you knew the decision to be made. I think a lot of people don't have that sometimes, unfortunately.
And it's, I haven't, so I can remember the last time I had alcohol. I was 19 on a cruise boat, and the guys asked me if I wanted a Long Island iced tea, and I go, I love iced tea. I had no idea, being a kid, what it was.
3 different alcohols.
And I was with one of my buddies, and I drank it, and I go, oh crap, dude, this has got alcohol in it. And I'm like, Robbie, you got to drink this for me. Yeah. He's like, sure. And he got drunk, and he was great. Yeah. But that was a long time. Last time I had tasted alcohol, and my mouth still waters when I smell a beer. Because I got to go to a lot of mixers and stuff for work and all that. Yeah. And so I spend a lot of time not unfortunately, just I have to spend a lot of time in bars and stuff, and in pubs or restaurants, and my mouth still waters to this day when I smell it.
I mean, I think, like Eric said, I think in a lot of ways, call it luck, call it whatever, but to have that realization at 19.
Yeah, I really feel very lucky, blessed, whatever you're going to call it.
Yeah.
Because I should have gotten into a lot worse trouble.
Right.
And I didn't. And I should have, you guys got to understand too, my dad, his whole side of the family has, his sisters, terrible, drug addicts.
Right.
All sorts of addictions.
Right.
In and out of prison.
Right.
And that
which
could have
plays
been
a role.
Absolutely.
Which plays a role in where
genetics.
Genetics and all that. Yeah.
For sure.
That could have been me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. I mean, I can't believe it. I mean, I'm just a lot of times.
Yeah.
And so it's, it was a pretty, I'm glad I went through it.
Right.
I never want to go through it again, but I needed it.
Yeah.
For me, I needed to figure things out.
To know that
this was right.
That was
for
a
me.
personality that you had. That addictive personality is probably really important.
But I'm but I get it I get addicted to all sorts of stuff too. It could trigger in a lot of things, not just drugs or alcohol.
No.
It's food,
video games,
whatever.
Yeah.
I'm like, why can't I get addicted to eating vegetables or running 10 miles?
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Right?
It's never stuff like that. That's good for you.
No.
It's always stuff that's bad for you.
Exactly.
And so I've always known that I have to be careful.
Right.
Around what I'm around. And so with the Dukies, these great friends, and I miss them so much. And most of them are back in California still. Mm-hmm. And because of social media, we could stay in contact, but I could never be around them the same way.
Right.
Because I knew I was going to have a problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that was really hard for me. And I don't even think they know this, but the good thing is, so what happened, for young Mormon kids, I went on a mission to Germany, and that was it turns you into a man very quickly.
Right.
It was very hard. And I grew up really fast, and especially considering what other 19-year-old kids were doing at the time, right?
Right.
And what I could have been doing myself.
Mm-hmm.
But when I came home, I was at a bachelor party as a designated driver. I'm a great wingman for those kinds of things.
Right.
And one of my buddies came up to me, and one of my Dukies, and he just said, "Dude, I don't know how you stopped. I have no idea. For everything that we used to do, I have no idea how you did that." And he's like, I'm really proud of you. And I was like, oh.
Right.
It was really eye-opening for me.
Wow.
But there's a cool thing about my friends is that they respected it. They're like, oh, Woody's a born-again Mormon. Woody's born again. They always make fun of me. But they respected it. If we were at a party and someone tried to give me a drink, they were all over it. They're like, nah, Woody's not going to do that. And I messed up a bunch of times along the way. But it wasn't actually until after high school and I started hanging around Nate.
Right.
My older brother, that it became a lot easier for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But getting through high school.
When your environment changes.
I had to just get out of the environment. I miss my friends so much, but we're still great friends. We keep in contact. One lives in Hawaii now, and we're friends on Facebook, and we can comment and stuff. But I mean, I can't spend too much time in a bar. I know that. If I'm in a bar too much, I'll know eventually I'll take a drink.
I think that's a really important point you're making, or I'm seeing a really important point here, is that this is something you made a decision when you were really young.
Yeah.
You served a mission for the LDS Church.
Yeah.
And here you are 39, and you still, I think most people would just assume, oh, he's being young, but you saw something in you. And you're 39, and you still realize there's a thing there that you can't even mess around with.
Yeah.
Because of your personality.
I knew.
You just knew.
I can't mess with it.
Yeah.
It's going to be a problem.
And that's what a lot of people miss is they don't realize, they don't know, and they just
but I get it because it's fun.
Of course.
Right? Like, it's fun to party. It's fun to do these
but
things.
let me ask you, like the truth of it is, did you feel like, because there's two different sides to that story. It's fun, but were you medicating, or were you suppressing or using, the partying as a way to kind of mask what you were going through?
Absolutely. It had to have been part of it.
Right.
Like I should probably go talk to a counselor or some kind of therapist about this. And I got a buddy who's one. He's a really great guy. But I mean, that definitely played a role. It had to have.
Yeah,
Of course.
Right?
Of course.
I mean, it wasn't a stable environment for me.
Right,
and
sure.
so, I mean, I'm sure, I was a wild guy anyways, but it was, that definitely played a role. I never wanted to be home. Like most people like going home.
Right.
Like I never went
just
home.
wanted to be there.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was drowning my sorrows in other things, right? And so, like, it's all the signs of someone with an addictive personality.
Right.
Everything that I did. Like now, as an adult, looking back and like all these friends, I'm like, oh crap! I wish you guys saw the signs. And
Right.
that's part of the kind of the driving factor for me with a lot of these. Why I love speaking to the youth.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't pay as good.
Right.
Like when I was becoming a speaker, I was like just debating. Well, corporate just pays so much better.
Of course. Yeah.
It's just so much better. But I just kept being drawn to the kids because this is the kind of crap they're going to be dealing with that I dealt with, and I made it out. Right. And I had it could have been really a lot worse, but it came down to choices that I made, obviously. And like today, my favorite speech that I've ever given was to my daughter's last year, or at the end of the school year or whatever. At her 8th grade graduation, I was asked to be the parent speaker, and I had 5 or 6 minutes to give a speech, and I'm like, that's not a lot of time. So you have to really hone what you're going to say to make an impact. And what's interesting, and so in Waldorf education, like the teacher, we were at a K through 8, but the teacher starts in 1st grade and moves with the class.
Oh, that's cool.
Right.
And at first I was really against it, but it turned out to be this really magical experience.
Makes a lot of sense to me in my
because
head.
the teacher then becomes they know the child just as good as you, or if not better, in a lot of cases, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so we worked together, and it was just this magical experience. And so my daughter was with the same kids, some left and came, whatever, but for the most part, the same core group of kids, same teachers, like specialty teachers, Spanish teachers, even, you know what I mean? And so I knew these kids really well. Like I was the cool dad, always on the field trips and everything. Like I knew these kids really well, and I was coaching the sports and stuff. And so I really wanted to give something to these kids, and I spoke to them for 6 minutes on choices, about what your choices would do for you. Like you can choose to be happy. You could choose to do a lot of things in this world, but ultimately, if you're going to be happy, it's going to be down to the choices that you make for yourself, whatever's right for you. And today, that is still the most, and it meant a lot to me because I knew these kids personally, right? This is not an audience I didn't know,
Right.
and there's like 30 of them. You know what I mean? It was like that was it, and then the parents and the audience. It was like not a huge crowd, but today that is still the most requested speech I've ever given. Like people want, can I have that?
Right.
I want to read that to my kids.
That's awesome.
But anyways, it's just this whole idea of, of what I know what they're going to go through.
Right.
In a lot of cases, like for some kids, high school is miserable. Like they get made fun of, the bullying, all that kind of bull crap that happens, and so that's why I go to them.
That's awesome, man. That's really awesome. So, Adam, what we like to do towards the end of the podcast is, you brought a lot of information to the table. I liked that you opened up at the end there about, what you kind of went through, because I think that informs us a little bit about who you are and what's brought you to where
probably
you're
should have
at.
done that first, huh?
And that's okay. That's all right. It's free form.
Nope. It's all
But
good.
let me ask you, for someone out there who's thinking about writing a book, or they have, or dragons, this just if I mean, you're a speaker, so pretend there's, hundreds of people listening. Just what is the advice that you would want to leave with, our listeners about, whether it's writing or conquering their dragons? What's a good piece of information you can leave behind?
First of all, you're never alone. I know even as adults, we feel like that. We're all going to go through crap over and over. but you're never alone. There's always someone to turn to. Always. I don't care who you are. There is always somebody to turn to. And I know you don't feel that way right now, but it's true.
Right.
Don't be the young me. I'm telling you, there's always someone you could turn to. And then the second thing, if we're going to kind of the book side of things,
Right.
is if you have a story to tell, share it. Write it down. Because stories are powerful. Like Ken Burns, he's a great, I don't know if you guys know him, he's a documentary filmmaker.
Oh, yeah.
He did one on baseball that was awesome. Like, he's a great
Yeah.
documentary
He does some
film guy.
phenomenal stuff. Yeah.
And I was listening to an interview he did one time several years ago, and he had done basically Jim Rome. It was on a sports show of all things, but Jim Rome was like, "Hey, well, what can teachers do like to teach history like to these kids, right? Because that's
Right.
what he's about, is telling, sharing history of the world." And Ken Burns said they need to stop teaching history and they need to start telling stories, because it's the stories that are gonna capture these kids' attention, right? And you think about it, any of the like the biggest learning moments in all of our lives is usually from a story that we heard, so, like around a campfire or whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And those are some of the greatest moments in our lives.
Yeah.
And so what I tell people is that I know how powerful storytelling is. And